Public Safety Committee to order. As always, our first unofficial item of business, but it's extremely official. I think the members of this circle will agree that we'd like to thank our police, our fire, and our emergency management departments for the work that you do every single day to keep our community safe. There's so many moving parts. I'm looking at attorneys and management staff. Thank you all for the work that you do to keep our community safe, and I'm sure the members of this committee would agree. The Public Safety Committee typically consists of two items, or two parts, the consent agenda and the general agenda. Items on the consent agenda are typically approved with the sweeping motion unless a member of this committee asks that an item be pulled for discussion or consideration. With that being said, members of the committee, are there any items on the consent that should be pulled for consideration? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Councilmember Scipio. Okay, Councilmember Larson, I think I know what you're going to say, but.
I think since we're on a roll, why don't we do C1?
All right, so that is the complete consent agenda. So what we'll do is we'll take item C1. Madam Clerk, if you can please call that item.
Item C1, resolution authorizing acceptance of the 2024 prosecuting cold cases using DNA grant award from the U.S. Department of Justice.
Councilmember Larson is recognized. Chief Penn, thank you for being with us today. Councilmember Larson, is your question towards the chief, or did you just want to make a comment in general?
First of all, I think the public ought to know that we have in the consent agenda 3 items that are generating money for this city. And I think it's worthy of noting that the police department
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Taylor, members of the committee, and council. So we're always looking for ways to improve the agency, and we found an opportunity to use our employees to learn a little bit about genealogy, go back to our cold cases, and be able to determine if we can identify the suspects involved in those cases. So we're working on staffing. We're going to find a way to make that work so that those unsolved homicides, we let our community know that we have not forgotten about them and that we're still striving to bring them to justice.
$300,000.
Yes.
A lot of change.
It is.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
I move in favor. Approval.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. Discussion. Chief, thank you for being here. I think this is a great grant to solve some of those cold cases that are out there. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to mess with our city manager for a second. Mr. City Manager, I think that some citizens may be concerned about the impact for grants like these to our budget. Tell me a little bit about this particular grant. Are matching funds necessary?
In this case, there are no matching funds required for this grant, so this is a program totally funded by the federal government.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chief. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of item C1, please vote yes. Opposers, no. Item C1 passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item C2, please.
Item C2, resolution authorizing acceptance of the 2024 Community-Oriented Policing Services Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act Grant Award.
Chief, I'm glad you decided to stay put. Before you say anything, I want to recognize Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment about this particular grant. I think it is an extraordinary grant. I don't think people understand the kind of pressure law enforcement officers are under. I had the opportunity some years ago of doing a ride along, and from the time we got in the vehicle until the time we exited, it was like a constant adrenaline and the stress of that job. I couldn't understand how an officer can hold their calm and their sanity working that shift for 8 hours when you never know what's coming next. So I was very pleased to see this grant come through because most of us need some counseling at some point in our lives. But with a high-stress job like an officer and the staff, I think this is great. So that was the reason I pulled it. I just think that we need to recognize that our officers are fellow human beings, just like all of us, and that we go through times in our lives that we really have no control over. But to be an officer on duty, it's remarkable the kind of stress they have to handle. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Scipio. Chief, since you're here, you got dressed for the party, why not dance? If you can just give us a brief informational about item C2, please.
Absolutely. As you all know, one of the pillars of 21st century policing is officer safety and wellness. And we as an agency have been committed to the wellness of our employees. As Councilmember Scipio just stated, we're seeing a lot of things out there. And leadership often talks about being able to help our community with their wellness. We have to be well ourselves. So as much as we've tried, we recognize that we're police officers and we're police employees. So this particular grant helps us bring someone in who can help us navigate. Because when you start talking about wellness, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. You know, it's so much. So we're extremely excited about this grant, and it goes in line with the vision of the city manager of making sure our employees know that they're cared for while they work for the city.
And you mentioned the city manager. Thank you for your comments. Mr. City Manager, same question. Are these matching grant funds?
There is no match for these grant funds. They're all no match. But I am going to add to the chief's comment. We had 3 new police recruits in employee orientation this morning that'll be coming on. And again, as the chief mentioned, one of the main things we emphasized to them was the ability to stay healthy as a part of our health insurance programs, a part of our mental health awareness programs, and our sick leave programs so that they can take care of themselves. It's a very important part of what we're trying to do.
Hear, hear. Thank you both. I need to get a motion on the floor, please, for C2.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been motioned and properly seconded. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no. Item C2 also passes unanimously. We'll move to item C3, Madam Clerk.
Item C3, resolution authorizing an interlocal agreement between the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and the County of Forsyth, North Carolina, to share 2024 Burn Justice Assistance Grant, the JAG Program Award.
Chief Penn, I'll come to you first.
All right. So as you all know, this is a grant that we receive on a yearly basis. We share with our partners in crime fight in the Sheriff's Office. And with that money, it allows us to make some purchases for some unbudgeted items. And as you can see, one of them is for gym equipment. And so again, that's in line, again, with the wellness that we spoke about. And the other is the LPR, license plate readers, which have been so pivotal in solving crime in our community and ensuring that we continue to secure the hope and well-being of our community.
Thank you for queuing that up. I think Councilmember Scipio brought this up, so I'll recognize her and anyone else who wishes to speak. Get your comments ready, and I'll come around. Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, Chief, my question was, the original predetermined allocation was split, and yet I think the actual implementation is going to be 50-50.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And not the original?
Right, and that's how we've been doing it for years, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
You gotta love the technology that you're bringing into your office, and I really appreciate you keeping us on the other edge of the technological changes that are occurring in law enforcement. So congratulations again on this.
Thank you, absolutely. The criminals are using it, so we have to be able to combat what they're doing.
Councilmember Mundy.
It will probably be after I've rotated off, but at some point, I would love for this body to see the results. I'm sure you're tracking what crimes are solved or enhanced by the license readers and other technology so that you can just give this group this is the technology we use, and these are the results, because we often get some naysayers who don't believe that there's a value there, and I want to be able to share numbers with those naysayers.
Absolutely. We have been keeping up with our success stories, and we could easily provide that to you all.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion on the floor for C3, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing nothing further, all in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no. The consent agenda, including item C3, is passed unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to our general agenda items. Madam Clerk.
Item G1, update on city assistance related to Hurricane Helene.
Members of the council and committee, as you know, our public safety departments consist of police, fire, and emergency management. We have our emergency management director here, Mr. August Vernon. Many of you are aware of some of the challenges that we faced, not all over the country, but particularly in North Carolina. The city of Winston-Salem has tried to be a friend and a partner in this state, and Mr. Vernon will give us some information on how we have been able to do that. I recognize you. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to be here. Two things before I get started. I'm glad they're going to talk about drones. There were some areas that were so impassable, they had to use mules or helicopters to get into. So drones were definitely a force multiplier, so I'm glad to see us. And some of our drone teams were up there assisting them. And again, I just want to definitely give a shout out to our responding agencies that are in here, because it's really hard to kind of describe the conditions on the ground there and the population you're working with there. So just to underline that on what an excellent job they did. So I'm going to talk about a couple things related to Hurricane Helene, and this is just sort of a quick 10,000-foot view. The information is still coming in. There's some incomplete slides in here. We still have people deployed. Some of us may be going back because the need up there is pretty great. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what we did the day the storm hit here. I'll give you a quick snapshot of how we typically, as public safety agencies in the city county, respond to potential storm impact. I'll talk for a minute about the statewide mutual aid agreement, which is an excellent agreement, which we are part of. And then I'll talk about how the agencies in the city and county responded to Western North Carolina. For the first time ever related to a natural disaster, I need to talk about misinformation and disinformation that is really impacting the response. I myself personally were challenged several times by people who thought I was with FEMA because we were wearing emergency management t-shirts, and until I could explain, once they knew I was from Winston-Salem, then they were happy to see us. So there's a lot of misinformation that has actually started to impact the response up there. And just some quick notes on how to assist and how not to assist. So first, what we did when the storm impacted here, like we typically will do with any tropical weather or ice storm or any other major event, we started planning within 72 hours before landfall because you don't want to start doing too much effort and it's not going to impact you, but we did see that we knew central North Carolina would have a landfall and we would be impacted in some form or fashion. One of the things we start doing with our marketing communication partners, we start putting out a lot of public preparedness messaging about be prepared, be self-sufficient, be ready, and doing a lot of media interviews around that. We also begin a battle rhythm of daily calls with the National Weather Service and North Carolina Division of Emergency Management. And again, this is all very typical on any kind of storm response. And the day of the storm impact, we did activate what is called our Situation Room and put our Emergency Operations Center on standby if it was required. The Situation Room is the smaller space. The EOC we can bring over 50 people into if we need to. And this is just a quick snapshot of the Situation Room up and running that day. We obviously had some impact from the storm. High volume of 911 calls, some flooding, some trees down. Representative from the agencies in here now were in there with us, including streets and others that we communicate with. And we're on the phone with the hospitals, the school systems. Again, that's a normal operation for us. So we were very fortunate. By that evening, there wasn't even a cloud in the sky. But very quickly, we started getting information out about how severe the impacts were in Western North Carolina. So the mutual aid system, I've heard that term used a lot in the media. We are very fortunate in North Carolina to have a mutual aid agreement that all 100 counties are part of, and we are certainly part of that. This came into effect after Hurricane Fran and a very disorganized response to that. And there's a lot of capabilities that come out of that. It allows us to tap pretty much every resource across North Carolina. We have deployed resources before. We have received resources, including example, the Weaver Fertilizer Fire. We had mutual aid resources that we requested and were able to come in. So this is just a very efficient and effective system to get the right resources to the right places at the right time, and it can help speed up, reimbursement and recovery funds. But they have told us we won't see that for at least 3 to 5 years. The storm is so large. So again, we are participants of the statewide mutual aid agreement, and we do a lot of things under that agreement that aren't always as high profile. So, and again, the agencies are in here I'll talk about. This is just a quick snapshot, and it's really hard to cover everything the teams did very quickly. Winston-Salem Fire Department, which is one of the statewide water rescue teams, was deployed to the area, and they had over 28 personnel in several different teams doing everything from water rescues to just relieving the fire crews up there who had not been home in 4 or 5 days and had lost their homes and needed just some relief. So some of our teams were able to go do that. We had public information, incident management team operations, et cetera, et cetera. Winston-Salem Police Department, over 38 personnel, again in multiple teams, protecting those water rescue teams, critical infrastructure and security. There was unfortunately episodes of looting that occurred in multiple jurisdictions in Western North Carolina. Everything to just running 911 calls and assisting local law enforcement and patrol functions, the drones, assisting in missing persons, donated goods. Again, it's hard to grab a snapshot of everything they did. The city-county departments, such as ourselves, city-county utilities just sent a 9-person team up, I believe, this morning to go work on water mains, water lines, and sewer lines. My team of 5, we deployed 3, including myself. One of them spent 14 days trying to rebuild water infrastructure in Asheville, and 2 of us were running the largest mass care shelter in Western North Carolina that was in Fletcher, across the street from the Asheville airport, which is a very challenging mission to say the least. All of us are back, and we're now getting other requests to go up there because there's a big need for just emergency management staff to relieve staff up there. Even our city county planning board has sent up a building inspector that will be deploying this week. And the list I'm sharing is not complete, and you can't see everything on the bottom, but our hospital systems, Atrium and Novant, have sent teams and resources. We've got doctors, nurses, PAs up there. Our nonprofits, our non-governmental organizations. Again, it's very difficult to capture what everyone is doing. On the county side, and again, this is all so far, there's more requests coming in. We have people up there now, some returning, some going. They sent 2 teams of 6 personnel up there. They've rotated out to get new teams in, doing everything from running just 911 EMS calls to evacuating nursing homes and medically fragile shelters, which is a very challenging situation, and helping provide medical care in mass care shelters up there. Our Health and Human Services has over 20 people that have rotated up there from DSS, Health and Human Services, Public Health, Environmental Health employees, preparedness coordinators, and others that have been up there, are up there now assisting. And again, this is not a complete list. I want the sheriff to know, I meant to fill this in, and I just now got some data on that, but they have had over 20, 30 people a week up there, rotating in and out, again, doing law enforcement functions, helping them keep their jails and detention centers open, providing relief to their executive teams, public information officers. Again, the Sheriff's Department has done a lot and is continuing to do so. And again, this list is not complete if I've missed anybody. One of the things that I had to do, and for emergency management, this was a big deal, I was able to brief Deanna Criswell, who is the FEMA administrator, and have some You only get about 10 or 15 minutes, but had a good candid conversation with her about things that were going on and some needs. And obviously, even their resources are stretched thin up there. So, and again, that's my glamour shot with her. It's a big deal in our world to brief her.
Looks good, by the way.
Thank you. So, again, public information, this has never really been an issue. We've always dealt with this, but this is the first time on a disaster of this scale that we have to remind people, utilize trusted and established sources of information. You need to conduct your own personal fact-finding. With this storm, there's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, hoaxes, and conspiracy theories that are actually starting to impact the response. To the point of similar to what we had to do during COVID, we had to do myth busting. So both FEMA and North Carolina Department of Public Safety have established fact versus rumor sites where people can go to try to fact check things as you hear them. A couple of observations I can make with some of the challenges and issues we dealt with. Number one, do not self-deploy, go rogue, or freelance. There's a lot of people going up there wanting to help in any way they can, but that is not helping. I had to spend a considerable amount of my time each day trying to assist people like that, including people that showed up and needed gas from us, which our priority is to keep fire trucks and police cars fueled up at our site. So we weren't able to do that. So that's almost putting more of a burden on a system that's already overloaded. For our governmental organizations, everyone I mentioned, we have to have what is called a mission or tracking number, and we will always have that. So a lot of people want to help, and we're all caring and giving, but just don't randomly load up supplies and head up there without a point of contact, a resource list, or a meeting location. People showed up with everything you could imagine, and it really created sometimes a security issue where we were at of just dropping stuff off. An example, you could bring up 1,000 diapers to us. We don't need them, but the next county over desperately needs diapers. So we know people want to help, but you just have to be careful doing that, and it was a pretty big drain on time, personnel, and resources. And there is a reminder that there are areas up there that we were occasionally operating in, had no fuel, no power, no water, no internet, no sewer, no hotel, no lodging, no nothing. And if you're going up there unprepared, you're not helping. So, and again, that's the environment a lot of the responders here were having to operate in. So we've got a lot of questions about this. So what I would recommend to the public and civilians, the best partnerships I were seeing were church to church. Church here linking up with a church up there, and they can tell you the needs and you can fill them, or nonprofit to nonprofit. Again, that cuts down on just going up there wanting to help. Also, please avoid cleaning out the closet. We had people bring wedding dresses. When we had people that just needed clothes, they were in the same clothes they were wearing 5 days ago when they were pulled out of the water. We had people bring Christmas decorations and bowling balls, and just that doesn't help, and all that stuff will be dropped in a landfill somewhere. So if someone goes up there, be prepared to be self-sufficient for 5 to 7 days, and I learned people don't know what that really means. So. And I hate to have to talk about this, but beware of scammers and scams. They are starting up. About once or twice a day, we were introduced to a new group that started up 24 hours before and were already asking for donations because they wanted to help. So as always, look for established, legitimate, recognized groups to make donations, because sometimes a financial donation is the best way to help in that situation. And we have those groups around here, so let's support them. But on a positive note, understanding that response, recovery, and cleanup can go on for days, weeks, and months. I can personally attest, because I was asked, there is a massive amount of personnel, funds, and resources flowing into Western North Carolina. I know yesterday there were over 40 military aircraft operating up there, moving supplies, both fixed wing and helicopter. There's over 1,000 responders in Western North Carolina, which includes the numbers from our agencies, over 1,000 military personnel. The FEMA administrator told me their next step is to start activating active duty military to get more of them up there. There's over 800 Red Cross workers. We saw convoys of 200 power company trucks. There is a tremendous amount of resources trying to get to the right place to help. And I personally saw lots of acts of kindness and assistance. I always take cash on these deployments. I took $100 of cash and I gave away every dollar I had for people that desperately needed it. So there, besides all the negative misinformation, disinformation, there is a cooperative spirit occurring and a lot of people are helping up there. So I just want to try to end on somewhat of a positive note. So again, we still have people deployed. We'll have more going. We have people coming back. This is all still developing, but I just want to give you a quick snapshot of where we're at. Do you have any questions about anything?
Before we move to questions, I will say thank you on behalf of this committee for leading this initiative out west. You guys did a lot of good, and we appreciate not only what you've been doing, but what you will continue to do. We'll go with Vice Chairman, Mr. Larson.
What area were you deployed in generally?
I spent most of my time in Fletcher, North Carolina, which is a suburb. We were either in Asheville or Fletcher. But there's a lot of tension on Asheville. There's 19 other counties that were seriously impacted.
The need is great all over down.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Mundy.
I'll echo my thanks to you, August, and everyone else who's been boots on ground, because like you said, most of us don't even realize what that entails. And that's a big sacrifice, not only for the responders, but for their families as well. So thank you for that. Did the storm in Florida dilute any of the efforts going on in North Carolina?
Yes, there were, and I mean, that happens. There were resources that were coming this way. Florida is a big disaster resource state. They have a lot of resources, so when they were impacted down there, that started redirecting resources. But I personally saw resources from New York, from California. There was a lot of resources coming in.
Thank you.
Many hands definitely make light work. Any other thoughts or comments about item G1? Mr. Vernon, thank you for the presentation and for work that you guys and girls have done out west. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Item G2, please, Madam Clerk.
Item G2, update on Winston-Salem Police Department drone as a first responder program.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon, Chief. How are you?
Chair Taylor, Public Safety Committee, and rest of the council members. I'm here to present to you guys, give you guys an update on our drone usage at the Winston-Salem Police Department. Here we go. As you can see, before you is our rebranded emblem that we use for our support unit, which includes both our tactical operations drones and our drone as a first responder. I'll get into that here shortly. Before we get going, I do want to recognize Mr. Basil Yap, who's with AeroX. They're a consulting firm that we use here locally, kind of get us through the regulatory side of dealing with the FAA. Their expertise has come in very handy as we navigated this complex process. Also, Captain Knight, who is the captain over the air support unit, and we have a pilot here, Mr. Noah Etheridge, who is in IT, but is also one of our certified drone pilots, if you guys have any questions as we move along through the presentation. So this is just a little video. I'm going to talk while I play it. Essentially, the videos that are captured by the drones fall under the auspice of the body-worn camera statute, so they're very restrictive. We use this video here as a form of recruitment, but it kind of encapsulates what we do with the drones, either the tactical side or the DFR side. So the police department has been using SUASs. So what are SUASs? So they're small uncrewed aircraft systems. That's a mouthful. They're actually just drones, right? So I'll continue calling them drones moving forward. We've been in operation since 2018, where we've been using drones for tactical purposes. A tactical response is an officer has a drone in their patrol vehicle. They respond to a missing child, a barricaded subject, or somebody that's fled from law enforcement. They respond to the scene, they deploy the drone, and within line of sight, they operate the drone, providing that information back to our officers in the field. Intelligent information, real-time information that they can use to make tactical decisions at that time. We've been doing that since 2018. Early 2019 in January, we did a media blitz where we informed the public that, hey, the WSPD will be using drones for operations. That went well. Fast forward to 2023, early on, Mayor Pro Tem Adams challenged the city, if you guys recall, to use other resources other than manpower, because we all know that we are strapped for manpower manpower when it comes to the police department and other city resources. So we embraced that challenge. We said, what can we do to move forward to make this a force multiplier? So we started investigating the Drone as a First Responder program. The Drone as a First Responder program is a little bit different than the tactical side. Essentially, we have a pilot at the police department flying within our DFR room, and then we have a pilot at a fixed location. That drone is ready to be deployed at a moment's notice from the real-time crime center, the DFR room, to deploy currently within 2 miles. I'll explain that process here in a second. So that's the differences between DFR and the tactical program. So currently, you see there the types of missions that we respond to. Basically, any emergent need that a drone could be useful is what we respond to, up into and including disaster reconnaissance for groups such as FEMA, emergency management, the fire department. So as we progress, this is our first site, which is the North Carolina School of the Arts. They agreed to assist us in this endeavor. If you see that small circle in the center, that is a 1 mile concentric circle from the middle point, which is the University of School of the Arts. That's what we were allowed to fly initially. The FAA provides certain certificates of authorization that allow us to fly within that radius, basically allowing the rooftop pilot to keep that drone within the line of sight. After you prove your airworthiness and submit the appropriate paperwork, and again, I can't give AeroX enough credit for this, helping us navigate that process, we now have a 2 mile BVLOS, so beyond visual line of sight. So as you can imagine, you cannot see a drone if it's out 2 miles from the launch location. So the FAA recognized that, hey, we're doing things appropriately, so they gave us the waiver, so that's what we're flying around now. If you look at the top of the circle and to the left, it's obviously not a full concentric circle. Those we have to take into mind areas that are restricted airspace, so Atrium Health, Baptist Hospital, if you will. We have obviously air care that's flying missions from that area, so we have to take that into account, restrictive airspaces. We're in constant contact with the tower here, Baptist Hospital, and the FAA to ensure that we're complying with all the restricted airspaces and making sure that they know we're in the air to not create another problem while we are in the air. Currently, this is the one location. We are in discussions with 3 other locations. At the conclusion of this, we're looking at 5, potentially 6 locations. What I will tell you is that we are pretty deep in conversations. We're in the process of signing MOUs. I'm not going to disclose the locations right now, obviously, in case something falls through with the MOUs, but we are about to launch these locations. And each site, how do we select the site? It's based on calls for service. So depending on the calls for service is what we want to make sure that we're deploying our resources effectively to ensure that our officers and our citizens are getting the most bang for the buck, if you will. So where are we right now with current DFR missions? So as of January 5th, 2024, which was our first missions, we have 175 flown missions. 143 of those missions, we've been there first on scene before an officer arrives. Our average response time is 90 seconds. Usually it's even lower than that. A priority 1 call, you're looking at a little bit about 4.5 minutes of an average response time. Within the 2 mile area, we're looking at 90 seconds. That plays a big role. I'll show you some examples here in a second as to where we're at with those type of operations. As you can see, we have 27 pilots and 19 pilots in training. This is a very manpower intensive type of operation. We have to have a pilot in the DFR room and a pilot on the rooftop. So I'll go into these success stories just to kind of give you an indication and idea of where we're at. This one is not that exciting, but it highlights the reasons why we looked at this program. So it basically is a force multiplier. So we had a bank alarm at one of our local banks within the area. It was an ATM bank alarm. Traditionally, we send 2 officers respond with an emergency response, which is blue lights and sirens. We were there within a minute. We immediately began to relay the information that we saw, or the pilot saw, to the officers, indicating, hey, this is probably a false alarm, some maintenance. It looks like there's a truck that's providing services to this ATM. Immediately canceled 1 unit, which made that unit available to answer other calls for service, and then slowed down that unit, therefore minimizing the risk that we run when we're running emergency response to any calls for service. So that was that one example. Not super exciting, but it highlights those things that we're after. This one, we had a dementia patient that left a center. Within a minute, we were on scene, immediately identified the dementia patient, and were able to direct our resources right to the patient. That allowed us to provide that patient with immediate medical services faster than we would have otherwise. It also allowed us to not have to deploy a big search party, if you will, of a bunch of officers and a bunch of other resources. So this highlights the efficiency of the program itself. And finally, pizza delivery driver. Somebody ordered pizza. Upon arrival, they were the victims of an armed robbery, multiple suspects. Immediately after the robbery, they fled into a dense wooded area. This was a nighttime operation. Our DFR program responded. Using the thermal capabilities from the drone, they were able to spot where they were concealed in the woods, directed our officers right to them, minimizing the risk to our officers and to the suspects themselves and other citizens. So as you can see, it's a force multiplier. It allows us to provide intelligence to our officers. It basically marries up to what we've been doing with the real-time crime center, and in conjunction with those fixed assets from the real-time crime center with these mobile assets, we're seeing a huge increase in solvability in cases almost immediately. There's been a lot of buy-in from the guys on the ground asking for this type of operation throughout the city. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time, and apologize about that. My belt just fell off, so I apologize about that. You saw how the benefits go. So I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen, and I'm going to highlight our valued partners. So obviously, you guys heard me talk about AeroX and the Career Center. So I think you guys will find this interesting. So we needed to find a way to recruit more people into the Winston-Salem Police Department. So as we brainstormed this idea, we found out that the Career Center actually has a very robust drone program where they're actually flying the exact same drones that we're flying for our department. So these high school aged young men and women that are graduating are coming out with a FAA license. They're coming out with their credentials from North Carolina DOT, and we're looking to hire them. So Chief Penn and I have been in conversations with the directors. They're all on board to where we can create a pathway to hire these young men and women into the police department, hopefully get them interested in police operations, and then funnel them into being police officers with that added asset of being drone operators. We hope that that's a pipeline that we can continue to use and contribute with. The Winston-Salem Fire Department, we respond to, within those areas, fires that they have, whether that's industrial or residential. And from that point, we are able to use the thermal capabilities of the drone to highlight where they need to focus their efforts. And then you guys see the Winston-Salem Department of Transportation. They have been a huge partner in everything that we do, real-time crime center and drone operations. There's many benefits for them to see some of the footage as we respond to traffic crashes that create those type of dangers to the citizens and everyone else responding. So that's pretty much it. I'll forget about my belt dropping and ask you guys if you guys have any questions.
Well, Chief Gomez, I think it was symbolic because our goal has been to make sure the department has lots of tools in their tool belt, and you have so many tools that it's heavy, man.
Fell off.
Too many tools.
Now, let me say this to our citizens who may be watching. Speaking of those tools, next year will be my 16th year on the council, and I can say for the vast majority of the time that we've been here, I can say this, that we've tried to make sure that our officers not only well paid, they're well trained and they're well prepared. So thank you to the staff for helping to do that. To our citizens, we want to make sure that they're getting to your communities and serving you as quickly as possible. One of the ways that we've been able to help to facilitate that is to create a district office process where we've got 4 districts. We're getting police officers out in communities. Sometimes, because the volume is high, we still need them to get out faster than they've already been getting out. And I think drones like these and tools like the ones that have been brought to this table in the form of grants will certainly help us long term. Chief Gomez, thank you for helping to lead this initiative. Captain Knight, Chief Penn, and everybody else. With that being said, we'll move to questions. Councilmember Mundy.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm a big proponent, but I do have several questions.
Absolutely.
I think you answered the question. The pilots don't have to be sworn officers.
Correct.
But the hope is that we pipeline them into being sworn.
Yes. So we do have a mixture of professional and sworn staff. We think it's a great initiative for our professional staff to have another thing that they can participate in, and they can fly a drone. Some of them are actually better than some of our sworn counterparts. So we encourage all of our employees to participate in the program.
You don't have enough drones for it to just to be a matter of course that every time there's a call, a drone goes out. So how is that decision made, and where and by whom?
Yep, so the tactical operations part, we put that responsibility on the field commander to decide, like, hey, do I need a drone to respond here? So those tactical operators, essentially, they come in, they check out a drone, they ride around with those drones in their vehicles, and then if there's a call for service that they need that type of capabilities, they'll respond and put that thing up in the air. The vast difference here is the time frame that it requires for response. Remember the average of 90 seconds. You still got to wait for that officer to respond to the scene. So if it's within a DFR location, we can get there pretty quickly.
Are we doing anything with Smith Reynolds Airport? Is there any way to engage them as, I see that as an underutilized resource oftentimes, and this could be a possibility to reactivate.
Yeah, so there's a lot of regulation by the Federal Aviation Administration, and we are in constant communication with the folks that run the tower at Smith Reynolds. Obviously, priority is fixed wing, actual full-blown aircraft and helicopters. So they have priority over the air, and some areas are restricted that we cannot fly DFR operations, but we can fly tactical missions because we're a law enforcement. You're getting into the weeds of all the operations, but yes, to answer your question, we are very engaged with anybody that's up in the air to ensure that we are making sure that we're not flying into each other, if you will.
And what other first responders or public safety officers are using this? Is Forsyth County Sheriff, is Kernersville Police Department, Clemens Police Department?
Yeah, so I think like Clemens Fire, they have drone operations. I know for sure the county does, and I am not sure about Kernersville. Do you know, Basil? Yeah, so not sure.
And last question, but it's probably the toughest one to answer. How do we respond to citizens who are worried about this being a big brother who is watching everything that they do and could gather information that it was not meant to gather and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So within our policies, we were very cognizant of that specific thing. And if you recall, we just went through this same type of questions when we stood up our real-time crime center. And I may also add that we're a nationally recognized model. We have folks from all over the country that come here to mimic what we're doing. So from that, we had some lessons that we were able to take away. So we were able to incorporate into our policies things like when we're flying to the location, the gimbal, so the camera, if you will, not being directed at people's homes and backyards. We're flying a mission, we're on our way there, we're call response, so we're trying to get there and provide the information to the officers to keep the officers, the suspect, and the citizens safe. So yeah, so we have measures in place for that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, I think this is so fascinating. Technology is just amazing, and it's so great that we're able to tap into it for protecting our community. And I think it's great that we can work with the Career Center to recruit young people.
Yes, ma'am.
Because they do so many interesting things over there at the Career Center, and it's great that we can benefit, hopefully, in doing that. Councilmember Monday asked most of my questions, but that's okay. What is curious to me is a 90-second response, but you have to have a tactical officer dispatched first.
So I think
or how does all that work?
So I think you're conflating the two different
Okay.
programs. So the tactical program is an officer has a drone in their car, and they still have whatever minutes it takes for them to respond to the scene. Within the designated DFR areas, which is the other program, that drone is sitting at the ready. So when we incorporate other technologies like Live 911 that you guys funded, essentially the pilots can listen to the call for service coming in, make an initial determination based on a bunch of different assessments that they make. They can say, okay, this meets the criteria, this is an emergency. They send the drone up. Before the call for service is even input into the system, they're flying there, and then they're providing that information to the officers. So that's where the 90-second response time comes from, because that drone is sitting at the ready to go the minute the call comes in.
But are the drones being deployed all over the city, or is it just in that one little designated area?
Currently, we have a 1-2 mile area that's designated for DFR. Like I told you, we have 3 other locations that are where one of them were into the signature phases of the memorandum of understanding of where the location that we're going to use. So it takes some time, as you can imagine, getting up with our third partners and ensuring that legally we're doing everything that they want us to do, and it makes it through our legal. So it's basically a contract for us. We're not necessarily renting space, but they're allowing us to be there, and we have to comply with those type of standards. So it takes a little bit of time, but yes, that's the hope, that we have coverage everywhere that we need coverage.
Is the hope that we have coverage citywide or just in designated areas of the city?
I think citywide coverage would be a stretch, because there's certainly certain portions of the city that don't necessarily, the call for service volume isn't there. I think our target is those high dense call for service areas, and then we can look at expanding outward. But yes, I mean, is it viable to have coverage for the entire city? Yes. Right? It's just a matter of how much money are we willing to spend, because as you guys know, technology is not cheap.
Chief, just to clarify though, our tactical officers can respond anywhere in the city
Yes.
when it's needed. So there is citywide coverage.
Yes.
Just not with a fixed location. Which I think is what you're asking.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that clarification. Tactical, yes.
Any other questions?
Except for those spaces like around Baptist Hospital. That's a no-fly ever, is that correct?
Well, so this is where we get into the nuances of the DFR program and the tactical program. Depending on the emergency that's there, because we're a law enforcement operations, we have certain waivers that we could launch. It takes a lot of coordination between us and Baptist Hospital, or Smith Reynolds, if you will. But yes, through the tactical program, we could still launch in those locations. We just have to be extra vigilant when we do that.
Okay, yeah, it's easy to get those two conflated, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, this has been an informational item, and we are officially informed. Thank you, Chief Gomez, for the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
We'll move right along with the agenda to item G3, please, Madam Clerk.
Item G3, ordinance amending City Code Chapter 2, Article 3, Civil Service Board Regulations for the City of Winston-Salem.
Members of the committee, it's my understanding we may have a need to adjust the implementation process for this particular civil service board. I recognize Attorney Carmen to give us a brief presentation, and then we'll move for consideration. Attorney Carmen, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Taylor, committee members, and council members. As Chairman Taylor indicated, the purpose of this ordinance amendment is to make a minor adjustment to the ordinance that was adopted by City Council in June, creating the Civil Service Board. Just briefly, since that time, City Council has adopted the Civilian Public Safety Pay Plan in an effort to separate those employees in police and fire that are in the classified service and subject to the Civil Service Board from the general employee population. That was adopted on September 16th of this year, and staff since that time has continued to work on the online application process. Next page, please. And as a part of that process, an ad will be going out hopefully tomorrow with an application deadline of October 31st, 2024 for submission of applications by persons interested in serving on the Civil Service Board. Staff, in the meantime, will continue to work on refining the election process. And as we were working on that process, just briefly, we noticed that in terms of trying to line up the absentee ballot process, which the legislation doesn't require, but we thought it might be helpful, with the overall election process, it appeared that the time frame for the absentee ballot process needed to be adjusted slightly. Right now, it requires at least 60 days notification of the absentee ballot process, and we think at least 30 days would be more appropriate and line up more with the overall election process. Next page, please. So at this point, we're asking for an adjustment to the ordinance to change the at least 60 days to at least 30 days. And once that's done by council, of course, we'll continue to work on the election process with the hopes of having the election by February of next year. And then once those two people have been elected, one by police, one by fire, then the police chiefs will get together and appoint a third person. And then council will appoint the fourth person, and then the board itself will appoint the fifth person. And once they have been impaneled, then we'll start the training process. So that's the revised timeline and the reason for the requested tweak to the ordinance. Again, it's minor.
I think you explained it in full detail. Are there any questions at this time for Attorney Carmen regarding this item? Pretty cut and dry. Councilmember Mundy.
Not necessarily this item, but after the 5 members are impaneled, do they then choose a chair? Is that?
Actually, city council chooses the chair.
Okay, I didn't
Right.
remember that.
They choose the vice chair, should they want a vice chair.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions or discussion, this is an action item. Is there a motion on the floor to approve item G3?
Move to approve.
Second? Councilmember Larson. All in favor, please vote yes. Opposers, no. Item G3 is approved unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, the final item on the agenda, please.
Item G4, ordinance amending City Code, Chapter 34, establishing regulations of massage and bodywork therapy businesses.
A general theme today has been making sure that our law enforcement has all the tools that they need in their toolbox to be successful. Who's going to give us a presentation on this item?
Hi, I'm Susan Warner. I'm a detective in the SVU unit at Winston-Salem PD, and I specialize in human trafficking investigations.
Detective, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your time. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what illicit massage is first. An illicit massage business, I'll go ahead and call it an IMB from now on probably. They operate under the guise of legitimate massage and body work, but then they illegally provide commercial sex services to clients. Common indicators include extensive hours and days of operation, meaning 13 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on holidays. All male clientele, blocked out windows to obstruct the view of the establishment from outside, rear entries or locked entries where clients are buzzed in, advertisements on escort sites depicting erotically dressed or posed females with lines such as "new hot Asian girls," not the kind of advertisement you would see for a legitimate massage business. And the workers living out of their suitcases in the businesses on pallets or floor mattresses. Over the last decade, the IMB industry has developed with an estimated 13,000 IMBs operating in the U.S. under a pyramid scheme. This is where dozens of bosses, each with several lines of business, several dozen of managers facilitating operations, and then hundreds of workers are involved. As with any industry, there are also ancillary service providers. In this case, there are drivers, money launderers, currency exchange dealers, illicit web content creators, employment agencies, farming the workers out, housing managers, running what's called a family hotel where teen immigrants might be paying $20 or $25 a night to stay on the floor on a pallet and live out of their suitcase until they're deployed to a job. Travel agents handling all the travel arrangements, and even attorneys who participate. And the way that we learned a lot about this industry was by conducting a national multi-jurisdictional investigation over a period of 3 years. We partnered with Homeland Security Investigations to uncover a transnational criminal organization by following the trail from 3 illicit massage businesses that were operating here in Winston-Salem. That case is pending federal indictments. Some months after the conclusion of that investigation, some IMBs moved back into our city with ties to other businesses in North Carolina and South Carolina. And that case resulted in state charges for continuing criminal enterprise. All of the involved parties in both of our cases were from China, with most of the workers coming from the same poor province in China. The trail led us to all parts of the U.S., with much of the U.S. currency flowing to China. We also found indicators of immigration fraud, Social Security fraud, and other benefit fraud, and human trafficking. The definition of human trafficking is the use of forward fraud or coercion to subject another to sexual or labor servitude. The illicit massage industry combines both of those. While the workers are often not willing to identify as victims for a number of reasons, we believe they are defrauded and coerced into doing things they would otherwise not do in order to come here and make an income. Coercion is a difficult concept to prove in court without the victim's cooperation. So it's been a lot, over the past decade, law enforcement has had to come up with alternative ways to hold these folks accountable for what they're doing, including the fraud and the money laundering charges and so forth. These are all national security issues, but we also saw harm to our local community. One IMB was situated between a church and a hair salon. Men came into the hair salon thinking they were at the massage business and propositioned the workers who answered the door. And then imagine going to church on Sunday morning and seeing men going in and out of the back entrance of this house next door, knowing what was going on. A neighboring business owner at another location witnessed sexual activity by a male customer in the parking lot prior to going into the IMB. We've had countless complaints from neighboring businesses and residents when these parlors have operated in their area. As you can imagine, these investigations take an inordinate amount of labor and other resources with all the surveillance and coordinating with other jurisdictions. And we think that a preventative measure that makes it difficult for IMBs to establish themselves here would help tremendously. There's already a state regulatory agency, the North Carolina Massage Licensing Board, with which we've met and deconflicted. They are more reactive in nature, however, meaning that they respond when there's a complaint about a business and perform inspections. They then might cite a violation for failure to obtain a state massage license or some other violation and provide the business with a schedule under which to come into compliance. This proposed ordinance would not only provide an additional layer of regulation, but it's built to prevent the businesses from opening in the first place. There are other cities and municipalities that have already enacted such ordinances and had success. Greensboro so far is the only other one in North Carolina that has ordinances in place. This ordinance would require massage businesses to apply for a permit, submit to a background check, provide a list of all employees, keep that list current, list other establishments that are owned and operated by the applicant, and provide a description of any other businesses that they control. And I can tell you, it would be easy to tell when, after Revenue sends us the application and we do the background check, as to whether these people should be granted a permit or not. It would also require the business employees to have a valid license for massage issued by the state, and it would hold the landlords accountable, stating that anyone leasing, renting, or advertising the massage business have a valid state massage license. And other regulations, common sense ones like the employees of the business being 18 or over, and keeping us apprised of any changes in ownership or employees. This just lists some of the municipalities that were helping with this, or that have already enacted ordinances. This industry has become so pervasive and such an issue in our country that there's now a national conference held every other year just on how to combat the illicit massage industry. It's sponsored by a nonprofit called The Network out of Flushing, New York, which is one of the main entry points for Asian immigrants. And they are the organization who recommended this as part of a multi-pronged effect to fight the issue. Any questions?
Detective Warner, I know we've had some spot issues in Winston-Salem, and I know you've mentioned Greensboro, who's also passed this ordinance. Is this more of an issue that we're facing here in the city of Winston-Salem, or is this more of a national trend that we're just being aware of and stepping out in front of it and trying to address it ahead of time? What are your thoughts about that?
We're on the forefront, yeah. But the only reason we are is because you guys allow us to be so specially trained and well-trained and aggressive in our job. And we know that any issue that's a national issue is our issue. So we're
Any
just
questions
trying.
excuse me if I interrupted you.
Yeah,
I thought you were
that's
finished.
okay. We're just trying to solve the problem for Winston-Salem, though.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll just start on this. Well, we started on this end last time. We'll start with Mr. Larson. Yeah, Mr. Larson put his thumb up. He gets some respect around here. You got it, sir.
So there's a North Carolina Board of Massage and Bodywork Therapy, which is a licensing agency for operations, business operations for massage. Is that correct?
They do. They are the ones who who certify individuals with their individual massage license, but not the business itself.
They don't authorize the businesses itself, just individuals.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
That's correct. They're licensing individuals, just like a
Just like a
dentist
hairstylist or a-
other folks. They would be licensed by the state as an individual, but businesses are controlled by local land use, local regulations.
What I'm trying to get to is that the relationship between the state and local government in this matter. Apparently, we're asking now to create a permitting system.
Well, I think the issue is we would work very closely with the state to make sure that the individuals employed by a massage parlor were actually those folks that had certifications to do that work.
We would be able to refer to this, we would be able to talk to the state and ask them, is this person licensed? Are all of these employees that this employer has given us that are going to be working in this spa, are they all licensed? And they would be able to tell us yes or no.
So we are not creating another permit that has to be applied for by the massage workers.
Not by the workers, but this ordinance would be related to businesses that are being established, and we give the police department the authority to ask the appropriate questions to make sure that it's a legitimate business.
So do we have any other occasions where we ask for business permits for operating a business in Winston-Salem? Thought we'd done away with permitting.
I'll be happy to answer that question, Chairman Taylor.
Please do.
Okay. There are other businesses in the city code that are required to get a permit. Not all, but there are some others, yes. What you're thinking of is probably the privilege license, where they would get the privilege license and we would charge for that. And based upon the changes in the state law, you can only charge so much for a privilege license, and it doesn't really make it reasonable or effective for the city to basically have the privilege license program that it used to have, but it still requires certain permits, if that makes sense.
I don't understand those differences here. The other businesses are the ones that operate demanding permit.
This, but
Can you give me an example, for example? Another business.
Mr. Larson, could you speak into the microphone, please, sir?
I'm asking for another example where we're asking a business to get a permit before they go into operation. Is what I'm saying. Are we opening the door here to acquiring permits within the business world?
Madam Attorney, did you want to answer that?
I will. In fact, I'm going to the city code right now to tell you. I think it's in chapter 38, so give me a minute. Or if you want to go ahead and ask some other questions, and I'll come back to you.
Ms. Larson, do you have any other questions that you want to address while she's looking that up?
I do have just one other word. In looking at the ordinance, it talked about what the intent was to accomplish. And one of the things was health, safety, welfare of the citizens, but it also listed for moral reasons. Are we in the business of dictating morals?
It's a valid question. I don't know that any staff could answer that, but that's an extremely valid question.
It's in the code. It's in the ordinance. The word moral is in the ordinance. And I'm just wondering if we are in the business of dictating what morals are.
I would question that as well, if that's appropriate to include that in an ordinance.
Well, let's get, the attorney looks like she has the answer here, so let's get her on the floor, and then we'll move around the table. Attorney Carmen.
I was just going to say pawn shops is an example of other businesses that we do license, as well as, I believe, fortune tellers. Of course, you have a panhandler's permit. There are a couple of other types of businesses, pawnbrokers, that we do require a license or permit of by code.
Mr. Larson?
Well, I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Yeah, the other question is, the reason for this ordinance is being passed for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens, but also includes for the moral reasons.
Let us carry that back to look at, but I think it's probably pretty easy for us to strike and morals if that's a concern to council, and just to protect the public health, safety, and welfare would suffice for what we're trying to do.
I think that would be the point.
And that would be fine, but I think actually that may be out of the general statute 168, 174, ordinance making authority. I think it has morals in it, but if that's an issue, I mean, we can certainly remove that.
And Madam Attorney, while you have the floor, how time sensitive is this matter? I imagine there are going to be a number of council members who have questions about this. Is this something we need to go forward with today? We can do that, but I imagine questions about morals and things, we might want to come back and bring that information, but let us know how time sensitive this is.
We can certainly hold it in committee for another month.
Mr. Manager?
No, that's right. If council has questions, we want to be able to make sure we fully answer all the questions before this comes to the full council. So if you've got questions, we'll be glad to get those answered for you before it goes forward.
Okay, so let's move around the table. Let's get all the questions on the floor, then we'll come back around and see if there are additional comments. Mr. Larson, did you have anything else before we move around?
I appreciate a delay on this because it is a rather large ordinance and requires some thoughtfulness as you read through the whole document.
Agreed. Councilmember Byrd. Councilmember Mundy.
First, I will echo my concern that Councilmember Larson has. Just including that word opens up a whole can of worms because your idea of morality and my idea of morality don't necessarily match. It's not for the ordinance, but for specifically including that word. Zoning. Could we not use zoning as a tool to, I mean, why is something like this operating between a church and a salon to begin with? It seems like we should be able to use zoning in some cases to shut it down, not an instead of, but in addition to.
Mr. King?
Councilor Mundy, we have dealt with these from a zoning standpoint before, and we've shut them down when obviously they don't have a, so there's two pieces there. There's the illegal activity versus a licensed, valid massage therapist. So if you were doing something that's simply illegal, there's no place in the zoning ordinance for that. If you were doing a massage therapy business and you just don't have the proper permits and the proper zoning, that's a different recourse. I texted Chris while we're having this discussion. I'm waiting for him to respond back, but I thought at one point from my time in land use that we did, for a massage therapy business, we did require proof of the state's licensure before we issued those permits because we were having some challenges in that, so I was waiting on confirmation, but I know we've looked into that in the past.
Yeah, and that we may have an opportunity to strengthen that or to change the wording so that they do operate in concert to attack the same problem. As we're holding this, I want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would penalize legitimate businesses, particularly since so many massage therapists are one person, LLC or sole proprietorship. I don't know enough to know what we have would do that, but it's a concern that I just think we should very proactively address.
Detective, did I cut you off, please?
Yeah, we've taken that into consideration too, and the requirements really aren't that extensive, and I think it's a list of things that a legitimate massage therapist would appreciate the illicit businesses being asked.
Permit-wise, I know we don't do the privilege permits, but is there a charge for these permits? Is that adding a cost to an individual business person?
I was going to say, if there is a charge, I don't remember one being built in, it would be minimal,
Okay,
because you can't charge for so much.
okay, thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, my concern is, does this discriminate in any kind of way? And I wanted to know, what are the current regulations for like hand and body massage or massage envy? Are we holding them to a higher call or not? Because I think the term illicit massage is sort of bothering me with the name of the ordinance, but I understand the intent of what's happening because it's illegal, whatever we're trying to get to. But I didn't know whether whatever we're doing, does that mean that the traditional massage places have to apply to this ordinance as well? So that's what I'm really trying to get to. And then I'm concerned about, what does enforcement look like after this ordinance goes in place? Does it give you more authority to shut something down or not? And how do you determine that, the illegal part of it? So those are my concerns.
I think there were
You can look into that.
great comments, great discussion around the table. We'll go back again, but I think the overarching view here is we don't want to cause concerns from legitimate operating businesses. But there is a thing in the country, and we've heard on a spot basis in the city, we want to stop illegal sex trafficking, and that's a problem. Not only for us, but for folks all across the country. So we want to stop this and get ahead of it before it becomes an issue, but we also want to be fair to the business, so I hear the council and committee. Councilmember Larson will come back around, and then we'll turn it to the city attorney.
Just one other quick sort of technical question, which I sort of indicated that home massages would not be allowed under this ordinance. So
I don't think that's not the case.
The question was, would home massages be allowed under this ordinance?
Home offices, basically.
Would normal massages be allowed
From home?
from home? I don't know what the state licensing regulations are on that.
This is related to businesses. Well,
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee.
Good afternoon.
So the question before us now is whether home massages would be permitted, is that correct?
That's
Okay,
correct.
so currently the North Carolina Board of Massage and Bodywork Therapy, they do issue licenses for individual massage practitioners as well as businesses that employ those people, like Massage Envy. And so we're not attempting to implement something new. These are things that are already required by state law. However, the illicit massage businesses that Detective Warner has been discussing often do not go through the appropriate channels to make sure that they are licensed through the state. So they are just holding themselves out as legal massage businesses. They're holding themselves out as businesses that perform the standard massage you would get at Massage Envy, but they are offering sexual services, which are in violation of state law. Prostitution is in violation of state law. That would be the moral aspect that was referenced. So in an attempt to discourage that and to make it harder for those businesses to function here, and that's because the North Carolina Board of Massage and Bodywork Therapy, once they're made aware of situations, they are in a position to address it, but it takes longer. And so those businesses would still be out there, sometimes in residential neighborhoods, without the city having an appropriate tool to address it. And so the desire here was to make something on the front end, not necessarily imposing an additional requirement, just that they have what the state says that they need to have, and that they are able to produce proof that they have that, so that we can make sure in Winston-Salem that those businesses do have everything that they are required by the state to have, and that we have a mechanism to address them if they don't. As far as enforcement, This is not creating a new misdemeanor. So of course, whatever sexual or related crimes that would occur in a place like this, those can still be addressed by law enforcement. As far as this ordinance, for the first instance of a violation, something that would be a violation of the proposed ordinance, they would receive a notice of violation. And then upon the second notice of violation, within a rolling 12 months, the business permit would be revoked for that business and require closure of the business, and that they could not use the premises for a similar usage for the next 6 months. And that would enable the city to make sure that that area was safe and those activities were not continuing. And if the business continues to operate after receiving that revocation, there would be a civil penalty imposed. So the enforcement would be through penalties and a civil matter.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Mundy?
Is there any penalty for the property owner, which in some cases may not be the business?
Well, under this proposed ordinance, they would be looked at as well. So if that type of, they would receive the notice, and if it continues, if nothing is done to stop that action there, then yes, there would be a penalty that would affect them.
I can see a property owner not being complicit at all, not even being aware if they have multiple properties. So that's why I raised the question.
Well, they would be notified because there's requirements for them to provide information to the city under this application process. So yes, the hope is that they would be aware and comply with the requirements.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio?
All right, I have a little confusion. Would these businesses have to have a permit to operate or not as a business?
It would be yes, and that should be submitted to the state, right?
So yes, a business that is providing massage, unless there's an exemption under the board, the Massage Act, unless there's an exemption that's already there, they are required to be licensed through the state for providing massage. And what we would request is to see that documentation before they are allowed to perform that work here.
Is the state license for the individual or for the whole business? I think that's my confusion.
All individuals that would be providing massage would be required to have the state license for them as an individual and for that to be posted.
Let me ask it this way.
And there's two processes. So yes, the business has to be licensed. So Massage Envy has to have one. But if John Doe is a massage provider, John Doe also needs a license individually.
Because that's what I was, so like, I go to a nail salon, the nail salon has to have a license to operate, and then all of the technicians have to have a license.
That's correct.
So we're asking in this ordinance the same thing, is that right?
Yes, we're asking the same thing that they are required to have through the state as well. So it's not an additional requirement. We're asking for documentation of the same thing.
Members of the council and committee, it will be my suggestion, as we've discussed, to hold this for another 30 days to get these questions answered. Any other questions that we want staff to investigate, bring back? I guess mine would be, how much staff time do you believe is necessary to maintain this information? I imagine it would be compiled in some kind of database. Do we have the staff to do it, and how much staff time is necessary? You don't have to answer that today. Just bring it back when you come back. Any other questions that we need to ask staff to look into, members of the council?
Chairman Taylor, I'm not sure, are we having committee meetings in November?
Yeah, we have one.
We have a committee of the whole in November. If we've got all the answers back, we can bring it there, or it can be just placed on the next public safety agenda when it comes out.
Is it fine by consensus to place this on the next Public Safety Committee agenda?
If the answer has been that it's not time sensitive, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I would just
Madam
simply
Attorney.
ask, if you all have questions, if you don't mind, get those to Pridgeon Green, who's the Assistant City Attorney in my office that's working with police on this matter.
Thank you. Everybody heard that? Any other questions or comments? Make sure you get it to Ms. Green.
Thank you.
We will do our best to try to address them by the next time we meet on this matter. Any other questions, comments on item G4? That completes our consent and general agenda items. Members of the council and committee, is there further business that should be considered for the good of the order? Seeing no further business, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.